Welcome to J Lowe Artist YouTube channel. Today we're doing watercolors on 300 series cold press illustration board. It's a lot of fun, it's good practice, and we'll be learning some techniques of just direct painting. So come on along and do some painting with us. And remember, art makes life better. So we're going to be doing some water paint today with Crayola watercolors. And we're going to do a little seahorse. We're going to do some wet on wet in the background, then we'll just do the seahorse. Go ahead and figure out where you want to put your object. In this case, our little seahorse. There are some amazing creatures in our earth. And this little seahorse is one of them. I'm going to leave him just a little bit more, a little less space up at the top. Again, if you draw lightly, then you can get rid of all the stuff you don't need. And if you don't feel like drawing everything, that's okay, because it's more of a guideline than anything. You don't really want a hard line around it either. So just sketch it in as quick as you can. All the colors and things in the background, we're going to do that wet on wet technique. Some people like to see some of the drawing underneath, so if you wanted to do more detail, you're more than welcome to. But you just don't want a hard line around it, especially in the light areas. Just try to get rid of as much graphite as I can. So when you're all ready, you've got your drawing all done. It's kind of where you want it. Let's go ahead and do the background. We're just going to do this with blotchy color, and you're going to use this picture as reference to whatever colors you want to use. So I see purples and blues, and maybe a little green in there, some orange. It is totally up to you, and you don't have to have them exactly the way they are. So I'm going to get my entire surface wet, just soppy wet. I'm using, yeah, you're using that odd paintbrush that is only used for water. You don't really paint with this brush. I guess you could, but. And I'm going to try and avoid getting any paint in my area for my seahorse. I want it to bleed in there. You could if you wanted a little bit, but especially the light areas, like in the chest area and things. And one good thing about this illustration board is it holds the water quite well. So, well, it's nice and wet. I'm just going to go ahead and drop some paint on it. Oh, what to start with? Oh, I guess I'll start with purple. And just let it fuzz. Now remember that you don't want to overwork your paint. If it's wet and you want it to fuzz, you just drop it in and you just let it do its thing. Got a little pink in there too. That might be kind of nice. I had a little red on my palette, so I picked that off. Mixes with the purple that's under there. Here's some yellow. Green. Some blue. Just whatever color you feel like. And if that blue mixes with a little bit of the yellow, you might get some green. Mixes with the green, you'll get some turquoise. If you need more water, go ahead and put more water down on there. Remember, you don't want to clean your brush in your water. If you need to clean your brush, do it in your paper towel. Never dip your brush wet into your palette. You'll get colors running off on it. Try not to scumble too much, where you take water and you kind of move it, because your colors will turn muddy. But if you want to do a few on your edges, just use pure water. Just grab some of that color. You can move it around. It's okay if it gets a little muddy, but you want overall those colors to be vibrant and beautiful. We can always add more later. You kind of got to work fast because it dries if you don't. Unless you want it to. I'm paying particular attention to the edges of my seahorse. Try to get a texture with your water paint. You don't want it just smooth. I guess it's okay if it were smooth, but try getting a texture with it. There's a little fan that's behind the seahorse. There's a little fin that's right there. You can barely see it, so I'm going to just pull it out while I'm doing the background. Might as well pull it out. And then it'll kind of blend into the background too, which is good. But experiment with that texture. Whatever texture you can get out of it. You just let it go. Just let it do its thing. I really like what's going on over here. I'm going to see if I can propagate that a little bit. Don't want to spend a huge amount of time on the background, but just enough to get that texture in there the way you want it. And we could always come back in later. Our little seahorse is quite warm. Everything kind of is in the background is cool, except some of this little orange that I stuck in up there. And maybe that might have been too much, but I'm just going to go in and just very lightly bring out some of that yellowy warmth in him. So I'm just going to bring out some yellow. This yellow has a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of purple in it, I think. So it's a little more on the dull side. Anything that's highlight, keep it in there. Just keep it white. You can always come back in, add more. Starting with this light texture. If you get a little bit of bleed from the edges, that's okay too. Try to avoid touching the edges too much. For the most part, you paint light to dark. Now I'm just adding a little orange over it. And you could go about whatever color you feel like you need, but I just wanted some of that little orangey warmth in there. The drier your background is, the harder your edges are going to be. So as I go, I'm going to try to keep it kind of dry, because I want some hard edges, especially towards the last of my painting. I do want to keep those highlights in there though. And if you get a little purple in there and it turns kind of gray, that's okay. There's a little bit of that in there, and we're going to just keep covering it and keep going. What here is important is your values, your contrast. If that orange is far too orange, remember to use the complementary color to tone it down. So if you put just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of blue in there, it will go kind of a brownish orange. And you may want that too. I'm going to go a little darker. Maybe I'm going to take some of that brown, just move the brown over and add a tiny bit of purple to that brown. It'll go kind of a gray brown. Still, it's going to feel a little on the warm side, but it's going to give me a little more contrast, which is really what I want. So here, this is mostly dry. I'm using a wet on dry technique for my paint. Quite wet, quite kind of gooey. I'm going over the top of what I did, but just barely touching it and letting it kind of fuzz and do its thing. I'm getting some harder edges, which makes it look more detailed. Don't overwork it. Just put the paint in, touch it, and let it go. If it's wet, it'll blend, it'll do its thing. Don't forget the reason we're doing this. You know why we're doing this? Because it's fun. Not only is it fun, but art makes life better. Because now you're going to learn to see things and experience things. How many of you ever took the time to look at a seahorse? Have you? Oh, good. Most people don't. They don't take that time, and they miss out on a lot of life. So I'm just trying to concentrate on value and texture. A lot of texture in here. Haven't used very much paint at all. No reason to use a ton of paint when you're water painting. Keep it simple. got about 3 or 4 minutes anyway until we can clean up. So get as much done as you can before you go. You can go back over anything you want to do. And you can use that big water brush to pull things out, to scumble things, to create some watery edges. And that's about as much time as we have. Make sure you sign it. I hope you had fun today and learned something. If it's nothing more than, gee, I didn't know little seahorses looked like that. And I hope you have a lovely day.